The radio crackled to life, a sharp burst of static slicing through the silence like a warning shot. It shattered the quiet hum of the patrol car, where moments before the only sound was the low purr of the engine and the occasional rustle of a passing breeze. It was a Thursday afternoon at the Frederick County Sheriff's Office in Maryland. A day that began like any other with routine briefings and coffee-fueled conversations. But as deputies suited up and checked their gear, none of them knew they were about to be thrust into a situation far more dangerous than a routine call. The dispatcher's voice came through, calm, professional, practiced, but beneath the surface there was a tension, a gravity that made every word land heavier than the last. A wanted fugitive had been located. He was holed up at the local Super8 Motel, possibly armed, definitely dangerous. This wasn't just another call, this was personal, the kind of case that hits you in the gut and stays with you long after the shift ends. Every officer knows the feeling, adrenaline surging, heart pounding, every sense sharpened to a razor's edge. You don't just hear the call, you feel it. The dispatcher read the name aloud, Jack Edgar Primer, a name that would soon be etched into every officer's mind. A quick search pulled up a disturbing profile. Primer wasn't just a fugitive, he was a predator with a long and vile history. Child pornography, abuse, exploitation. The list went on, each charge more sickening than the last. It was enough to make your stomach churn, enough to make even the most seasoned officers pause. Primer was considered a high-level threat to the community, especially to its most vulnerable members, the children. For the deputies, this wasn't just about making an arrest. It was about protecting their neighborhoods, their families, their own kids. The mission was clear. This predator needed to be off the streets, and fast. There was no room for hesitation, no time for second-guessing. The call to Super8 had been made, and now, it was time to answer. Jack Edgar Primer's face stared back from the computer screen in the patrol car. A grainy mugshot, but unmistakable, his expression blank, almost eerily calm. It was the kind of face that didn't betray emotion, didn't flinch under scrutiny. His eyes were cold, detached, the eyes of someone who had seen too much or maybe not enough of the line between right and wrong. They weren't just empty, they were calculating. As if he was always one step ahead, always watching, always planning. The charges against him were enough to make even seasoned officers wince. Production of child pornography, a crime that leaves scars far beyond the digital evidence. Sexual abuse of a minor assault, each accusation more horrifying than the last. The case file read like a nightmare, a chilling list of violations that painted a picture of a man with no moral compass. He wasn't just a suspect, he was a parent's worst nightmare. The kind of predator that stories warn you about, the kind that hides in plain sight. Communities were shaken, parents gripped by fear, wondering how someone like him had slipped through the cracks. The details of the case were still emerging, but one thing was clear. Primer was a master manipulator. He knew how to blend in, how to earn trust, how to exploit vulnerabilities. He didn't just commit crimes, he orchestrated them. He had managed to evade authorities for weeks, slipping through their fingers like a phantom. Every lead turned cold, every tip led to a dead end. It was as if he vanished into thin air, leaving behind only questions and fear. Rumors circulated about his whereabouts. Whispers of a motel room on the edge of town, a burner phone used to make cryptic calls, sightings that never quite panned out. He was always just out of reach, like a ghost haunting the edges of the map. A life lived in the shadows, where every movement was calculated, every hiding place temporary. He knew the system, knew how to stay invisible. But even shadows can't hide forever. Now, it seemed, those shadows were closing in. Law enforcement had narrowed the search, the net was tightening, and for Jack Edgar Primer, the illusion of safety was beginning to crumble. The hunt was almost over. The Super8 Motel stood at the edge of town, a forgotten outpost on the fringe of civilization. Its neon sign buzzed faintly in the twilight, casting a sickly glow over the cracked pavement and rusted railings. A beacon of cheap neon and faded dreams, it had seen better days, if it had ever seen good ones at all, the kind of place where people came to disappear or to be forgotten. Deputies arrived in unmarked cruisers, lights flashing but sirens off. The silence was intentional. This wasn't a show of force, it was a message. We're here, and we're ready. This wasn't a time for bravado, but for calculated precision. Every movement was deliberate, every breath measured. The team knew that one misstep could cost lives. Each officer understood the gravity of the moment. Their mission was clear: bring Primer into custody without escalating the situation, protect the innocent, and above all, make sure everyone made it home. The motel manager, visibly shaken and clutching a clipboard like a lifeline, confirmed Primer was in room 215. He spoke in hushed tones, eyes darting toward the second floor. He hadn't seen any weapons but said Primer seemed agitated, paranoid even, pacing the room, muttering to himself, like a tightly wound spring ready to snap. Inside, Primer moved like a man on the edge. His eyes flicked between the window and the door, his hands trembling as he clutched a phone that never rang. Outside, a plan began to take shape. Officers moved quickly but quietly, knocking on doors, ushering guests out with calm urgency. The perimeter was secured, exits blocked, and a command post established. Time was of the essence, but so was caution. Every second counted, but rushing in could trigger disaster. Radios crackled with updates, watches were synchronized, and every officer knew their role. The motel was now a pressure cooker, and one wrong move could turn it into a bloodbath. The next few minutes would determine everything, whether this ended in surrender or in tragedy. Tension hung thick in the air, a palpable entity outside room 215. A young deputy barely out of the academy stood with his hand hovering near his holster. His senior partner, a grizzled veteran with years under his belt, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Remember your training, son. Stay calm, stay focused." Then, a loudspeaker crackled to life. "Mr. Primer, this is the Frederick County Sheriff's Department. We know you're in there. Come out with your hands up and nobody gets hurt." Silence followed. An agonizing minute passed. Then another. Finally, Primer's voice, a raspy whisper, came through the door. "I'm armed. You come in here and I'll shoot." Word spread through the motel like wildfire. Armed standoff, suspect barricaded, possible hostage situation. Panic welled up in the eyes of guests as officers, moving with quiet urgency, evacuated rooms, herding families and travelers alike to a safe distance. The motel, once a place of transient anonymity, was now a powder keg. The arrival of the SWAT team brought a sense of grim determination. These were the elite, trained for situations like this, equipped to handle the unthinkable. Their movements were fluid, practiced, each officer a cog in a well-oiled machine. Negotiators prepared to make contact, their words a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. The standoff had entered a new, more dangerous phase.